All right, so after generating over $200 million in email attributed revenue for tons of brands over the last 7 years, I wanted to put together a video going over a full tutorial on how to set up your email marketing correctly so that you're not bleeding out money and so that you can scale aggressively. So whether you're a brand that's looking to scale, whether you're a person that runs brands email marketing for them, this is going to be incredibly valuable. I recommend that you watch until the end. I'm going to be showing you exactly how to navigate this specific platform, which is Omnisend, and I highly recommend this platform above most of them. The second thing is I'm going to go over the pop-up forms, then the campaigns, and the email flows. So by the end of this video, you're essentially going to know exactly how to set up everything faultless, and then you're not going to bleed money like most of the brands out there. And by the way, if you want to generate tons of revenue like the brands I'm going to show you in this video, then I absolutely recommend signing up for Omnisend, and you can actually get 30% off your first 3 months with the code JADE30. I'll put a link in the description as well as the code as well, so you can just copy paste it. But let's jump into the video. All right, so I'm just going to show you a backend, which is just using my agency as the account. So this is just kind of a burner account. But what I want to show you is, first things first, opening up Omnisend. So when you open up Omnisend, the first thing that you're going to see is essentially this screen. So you're going to open up, you're going to get led to the dashboard, and you're going to see this, and then you obviously just need to, number one, connect your store. That's the first thing that you're going to go ahead and do. The process is pretty simple and easy. Just make sure that it is set up correctly. Now, just showing you a quick navigation. If you want to see the results that you're generating from email marketing, go to the overview, and you're going to see a split between campaigns and automations, and it'll also show you what is not from Omnisend specifically. So this is just incredibly helpful to making sure that your attribution is correct. Then campaigns is super simple. This is where you're going to be sending out your weekly newsletters. So if you want to send out a sale tomorrow, or you want to send out a quick campaign about a new product dropping, this is where you're going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to show you the best practices for this as well. I'm going to show you an example of some emails that perform really well. Then you have your automations. This is your evergreen campaigns. This means that when someone performs a specific action, it sends a personalized message based on that action. So for example, if I go to your website right now and I try to check out, but it either fails or I leave because, life happens, what's going to happen is it's going to set off a trigger, and these automated sequences of emails are going to be sent out based on that trigger. And these are highly converting because, as you can imagine, it's retargeting people that are specifically performing an action that is high intent. So in my case, it would be incredibly valuable for me to get an email that says, hey, here's exactly what you left behind. If you're a little bit uncertain, here are our shipping times and here are some reviews that you might want to see. So that is hands down the best practice that you can see across the board. Then in terms of, you running ads, generating a ton of leads, getting organic content, starting to get traction with your brand if you haven't already. This is going to be incredibly important for you, but you want to make sure that you have your setup forms or your sign-up forms instead. So sign-up forms is essentially when someone comes to your website, they get a pop-up that says, hey, subscribe for 10% off or 20% off. And you want to capture their information to make sure that you have essentially free revenue sitting on your table without the additional cost. So you're spending to acquire customers. What this pop-up form is going to do is to make sure that those acquired customers are converting at a higher frequency, or at least have some kind of initiative or urgency to give you their information. Because once you have their information, you don't have to keep paying to acquire those customers. Those are owned customers, which is priceless, and you don't have to pay an additional cost for that. Then you get your audience tag. Now, this is super important. This is going to be important specifically for when you start sending campaigns. And essentially how to navigate this is you get your contacts. This is going to be where you upload any contacts, you add them manually. This is essentially where you're going to either export or you're going to see a population of all of your synced contacts that are on other platforms. So if you're syncing with Shopify or WooCommerce, they will automatically populate here, or you can start to import them. So this is important because it's going to show all your profiles. But now the most important thing is the segments tab. And I'm going to go into more detail, but the segments tab is really important because there's different areas of your audience. Yes, you have all of your audience who are a mixture of people that have subscribed, people that have performed certain actions, and people that have actually also placed an order. You want to separate them to understand your marketing better, your strategy better, and also send to different people for different intentions. So for example, if you want to know or send very effective campaigns, you should be sending to people that have engaged with you or your website very recently. If you want to make sure that you're increasing AOV and increase your repeat purchase rate, you want to make sure you're sending to one-time purchases or people that haven't made that step yet. So you get the point, but I'll go into more detail soon. Now, in terms of more reporting, this is where you're going to go into detail about that. If you want to understand exactly what is generating those sales, where it's coming from, similar to the dashboard, you're going to see this over here under reports. So that's everything that you need to know. What I'm going to do is I'm going to jump into the forms. Now, under the forms, again, this is super, super important. What you need to do is go here, preview and create, and then it's going to bring up a tab of the creator. Now, super simple, what you want is you do want a hero visual. Now, a hero visual is super important just to make sure that you are showcasing the brand, it looks appealing, and it is kind of a little bit more engaging. People trust this a lot more, especially if you're using lifestyle content or people actually using the product. And what we like to do is we like to display this a little bit more on the left side of the bar, okay? So you can choose where you want it to show, how you want it to show, whether you want it to be aligned, whether you want it to be anywhere else. And we prefer this. Now, keep in mind that you want to design specifically for desktop and mobile separately. So you want to make sure that it looks good on both. Now, best practice is that you want to make this a two-step process, but the second step is optional. You don't want to sacrifice the amount of submissions that you get just because it's a complicated process. So what you're going to do is on step number 1, you're going to upload your brand's image, and then over here, you're just going to put in the information. Now, I highly recommend something above 10%. 10% is a very weak offer in the industry. So generally what we like to do is get 20% off your first offer, or you can play around with $1 off. That also performs very well depending on your products. And now we like to make this very clear. You know, you can just say, and get the exclusive drops and discounts that were to send or email exclusive. So this is just an example of what you can send, right? And we want to make sure that this is obviously aligned, so that looks good to me. And then you obviously want to make sure that everything is branded according to your brand colors. So make everything consistent, and essentially they're just going to enter in their email. Now, in step number 2, you can make it optional that they receive or sign up with a phone number. But if you don't want to do this step, that's completely fine. We just make it optional. So what we can do is we can tackle 2 things, because we can also run SMS, or what we can do is we can collect other information like their birthday. That's super important. Now, on the success page, what we want to do, again, we changed it to 20%. So we want to make sure that we're consistent with that. And we want to make sure that they are checking their inbox. But another thing that you could do is you can make sure that their discount code is actually displayed over here, which makes it way easier to copy paste, which I do recommend. But the reason why not everyone should be doing this is it's dependent on the quality of traffic you get. You don't want people to, go ahead, get this code and essentially share it without being able to capture their information. That is going to be a little bit dangerous for you, and you want to capture that. So here you'll just put in welcome 20, for example, and then they can just go copy paste this, apply to the website, and go from there. So should be super simple. This is exactly how you set up, and then obviously from there they are going to be subscribed. So you'll just go ahead and enable that once you've completed it. Now, next up is the campaigns. Now, with the campaigns, they're super simple, but again, this is going to be evergreen content. Now, in terms of frequency and cadence of send, we recommend that you send a minimum of twice per week. If you think that sending anything more than that is too much, then you're incredibly wrong. The reason for it is because think about how many people receive so many emails every single day. They are not particularly stuck on your brand. Now, if you're sending twice a day every day, that might be a red flag. But if you're sending 3 to 4 times a week, that is perfect. You want to stay top of mind. You want to constantly give them reminders, but make sure that it is strategic. Now, when creating a campaign, it's super simple. Again, you're just going to go to create. You want to put a lot of importance in the subject line, and then you also want to make sure that in your sender name, we like to do 2 things. So, for example, let's just say that your brand is Mailsy. we like to make sure that we say the Mailzy team. We'll sometimes switch this up. And what we like to do is we like to send image-based emails and plain text emails. Both perform incredibly, incredibly well. But now when we're sending from a specific plain text email, we are adding a persona. So for example, when we send a plain text email, we'll say Jade from Mailzy. And then they know it's someone personal. And the chance of them clicking on this is very high because it's not coming from a brand. It seems personalized. And then great rule of thumb is adding their first name occasionally in the subject line and adding a default. So obviously if you don't have their name populated, you can just add a default. And you can send a just checking in. And then in terms of pre-header, this is super important. So the rule of thumb here is that the subject line essentially needs to be what gets them to open the email and it gets them to pay attention. So even adding some kind of emoji at the start, so something like that or whatever it is, add something different and get creative with it. There's no harm in that, but adding some kind of emoji helps you stand out. Now, the other thing that can help you stand out is adding an emoji before the sender name, which not many people do. Then in terms of the pre-header, the reason why this is so important rather than leaving it blank is because you want to make sure that it gives a little bit more information. So if I get an email saying just checking in with no context, it is a little bit ominous. I don't know what exactly to expect. Maybe I won't open it. But what if I do open this for 30% off with code? And then add an ellipses, which means that from this alone, they have to open the email, they have to pay attention, and they're going to go ahead and open it to make sure that they can get the code since it's cut off. That's just a clever way. And then with campaign name, this is just internal. So essentially, you're going to go ahead and name it something random. For example, you're going to Mailzy plain text email, for example. So that's going to be that. Then you can actually go ahead and choose some templates. But what we recommend is designing in Figma. Now, we personally have some designs in Figma and we've created video tutorials on it, which I will link above. But I recommend that you go ahead and you explore some of their templates, but there are really great ways for you to create high converting campaigns without making mistakes. Now, two databases where you can do the best research and also see what is highly performing is going on to Mild or going on to really good emails. And what's great about these is you can choose your industry. So let's just say that you are a beverage brand. You can go here and you can actually see what people are sending out and get in some inspiration. Now, I have purposefully gone onto Mild, which is also one of my favorites, and saved a bunch of brands that do incredibly strong emails. And so, for example, one that you have definitely heard of is Aura Ring, for example, or Dr. Squatch. So these are incredibly great brands to sign up to, and I would recommend pausing this video and taking a look at some of these brands. Now, between what I would take a look at and something that you can mold your brand around is definitely Breeze is incredibly strong based on strategy in all aspects. They're visual and they're text only. So I'm going to show you both. Now, best practice for a image-based email is within the first 5 seconds, you want to have the logo that doesn't take up too much space. Then you want to have your headline, your subtext, and a call to action, all on a hero visual that is cohesive to the quality of your brand. This is very important. You don't want it to look spammy. You want it to have a very simple call to action and intention. So you can see they're not trying to put too much information. They're prioritizing people that are action orientated, which is what most email marketing is. You don't want to keep them for too long. You don't want to bore them. You want to make sure that it is incredibly action orientated and make sure that it is both dark and light mode specific. So with them, what they're doing incredibly well is they follow the fold, which means that in the first 5 seconds, you know exactly what they're offering, how they're offering it, what it is to you, and where to get it. So you know that is their biggest offer, number one, which immediately sparks your interest. Number two, you know exactly how much you're going to save. And then number three, you know where to save. You have a call to action doing all of the thinking for you. So you're not wondering how much I'm actually saving, what is it on, etc., etc. Everything is clear. And then when you go down, you can actually see the specifics. So to begin with, you want to be brief, you want to be to the point, you want to be as summarized as possible. Then when you go down, you want to make sure that you have a little bit more information. But again, you're not going to overwhelm them with copy. That is not email marketing. there is a time and place for that, which is the plain text emails. So on the other hand, if you want to be very strategic, you're going to go ahead and do plain text emails. Now, the best way to do it is, again, create some kind of persona. They use Corbin from Breeze, which are incredibly strategic, and they then use a founder voice as well. So as a user, I like this because I don't only want to receive brand emails. Oftentimes I look past them, but if it seems like it's coming from a person, it's going to perform way better. Now, what they do really well is, again, it feels personal, like a very brief heyo instead of hello, Jade. It is very informal. It seems like a person reaching out, and they're just summarizing essentially what was in this email. So it is just an extension or a reminder, and they're extending the visual elements into a plain text version for anyone who has a priority over text emails, which is a huge part of your audience, by the way. So very simply, this is the best brand to look at for well-designed emails. And I'll show you a random brand. Let's go to the Dollar Shave Club. They follow the exact same principles. In the first 5 seconds, you see who's sending the email because of their logo. You see a hero plain text, a header, and then you see a subtext, and then you see a CTA. So within 5 seconds, you know exactly what they're selling, how they're selling it, and where to get it. So very, very simple, all on, again, high quality hero visual. That is the key to this. This email would not have the same impact if it was on a low quality visual and it didn't cohesively flow. So keep that in mind when you're building out your emails. Now, that kind of summarizes, and I recommend that you go to Mold and you go to really good emails to have a look at templates, have a look at how other brands are running, and you'll see the same consistency amongst all of the top brands. Just within the first 5 seconds, always a hero visual, always a header text, subtext, and then call to action is always the same formula. So super simple, keep it simple. That is as easy as it is. Now, what you're going to do is once you've built out your campaigns, you also want to make sure amongst everything that you have some flows built out. So when you go to your automations, what you're going to go ahead and do is you want to make sure you have a welcome flow, a checkout abandonment flow, a cart abandonment flow. Those are two different things, and I have a completely separate video about this. And then you want to have your browse abandonment. Those are the core 4 flows that you have to have in place for you to make sure that you're not bleeding money. Trust me, this is going to make a big difference, especially considering that up to 40 to 50% of your email marketing revenue is going to come from the flows and the automations. Because think about it, right now, as of the time of filming this, there's Black Friday happening. Not every customer that goes to your website is going to convert, but imagine how much of a higher conversion you're going to get when they get reminders, because life gets busy. Not only are people distracted and you're competing with TikTok, but you're also competing with people being uncertain about a purchase. So if you can tackle their pain points and their very low attention span in one go, why would you not do that? And so this is where I see most brands bleed money, is just by not having this in place. And so I'm going to show you a quick summary of how to set everything up and then show you the exact flow build-outs that you need to have. So first things first is the welcome flow. Now, the welcome flow, highly important. They have some pre-built for you that you can customize, and I definitely recommend that you do this. But I prefer starting from scratch. Otherwise, you can choose their pre-built ones. But basically, you're going to see a screen like this, and it's probably going to feel a little bit overwhelming with all the options, but it's going to be super simple. Basically, you want to choose your triggers. Just start from top down. Now, specifically, let's just say that we want to do our welcome flow. Then we want to make sure that we are selecting subscribe to marketing. So your trigger is essentially the condition they have to meet to enter the flow. So if you're doing an abandoned checkout or an abandoned cart, then your option will instead be added to cart. So super simple. Then what you want to do is you want to add some audience filters sometimes. So essentially this trigger applies to everyone right now, but we want to make sure that we add some filters later on. And again, I show this in more detail, but this essentially just makes sure the right and the correct people are getting these emails. Now, most important is the exit conditions. Again, this is so important because we wouldn't want a lot of our flows going to people that have already placed an order. For example, the cart abandonment, the checkout abandonment, and the browse abandonment. We don't want people who have already made an order or placed a purchase to go through these flows. Otherwise, it would be counterintuitive and redundant. They're getting tons and tons and tons of emails that just don't matter to them because they've already performed that action that you're trying to get them to take. So the way that you avoid that is you're going to add some exit conditions. And for our sake, we're going to say place an order. And so what's going to happen is if it If at any point during this entirety of this flow, so let's just say that by email 4, they go ahead and they place an order, they're going to stop getting our emails. So it doesn't only apply to the first email, this applies throughout the entire automation. Now, when it comes to building out, it's super simple. It is a drag and drop function. That's the best part about this platform. It simplifies everything. And so what you want to go ahead and do, specifically for the welcome, you don't want any delays, but make sure that you do keep an eye on your time delays. What you're going to do is you're literally just going to drag and drop, and you're going to do the same process that you did for your campaigns. You're going to build out your email. You're going to make sure that you do that on Figma and then export it here. Then you want to add a time delay. And this is very important because if you didn't have this time delay, it's just going to send about 5 emails to them, for example, with no wait time, which is just incredibly bad practice, and your audience is going to become fatigued and unsubscribe. So what we would instead do is, for example, wait a day. And so you can do that, and you can select on specific days of the week. And next up, we just want to drag and drop again. And then another feature that's incredible is the A/B testing or the split. Now for me, splitting the flow is very important. So let's just say that you're doing a cart abandonment flow, but you have 2 different types of products. You have gummies and then maybe you have drinks. But you want to send very specific messaging to every single person or very specific people. That's where you're going to add a split, and you're going to say contact properties, and you're going to make sure that you select that. Or you can split between male and female if you want to do that. You can split between the time of specific things. So you can choose how you want to do it. But for us, let's just say that we want to add in, if they've added a specific discount code, then we can split it. So you just have to do a little bit of experimentation to see. But for example, we want to split between someone that has actually opened an email versus someone that hasn't, and we're going to send them different messaging. Then we're going to go ahead and do that instead. So the split feature is incredibly valuable, and you can just play around, see a few things. But again, I've done a complete video on this separately. Now, next thing that I want to touch on is the audience. This is super, super, super important, and so many people get this wrong. Now, when we create our segments, there are 4 main segments that we like to create. So you just go to create, and then personally, I mean, you can use this AI feature, which is incredible and super accurate. Or you can go and create from scratch. And I'm just going to create from scratch to show you the logic of segmentation in case you still don't understand it. So a list is essentially a static group of people that you cannot change. But a segment changes based on actions. So similar to the automations, right? A segment will include, for example, let's just say that we create a segment of people that have engaged over the last 30 days. The benefit of doing that is because it's ever changing. It changes every single day based on those people taking those actions. So instead of us creating a segment and then we have to recreate it every 30 days to make sure that we're pulling in the right people, it does it automatically for you. Whereas if you just uploaded a list, there's no information on that. That is not going to change. A list is a list, it's static. This is dynamic based on actions. So for example, let's go here, and there are 4 main segmentations that we want to create just off the bat. Is number 1, we want to make sure that we're segmenting based on the highest engaged people. So we like to make a 120-day engaged or a 90-day engaged. It's completely up to you. And engaged means, in our terms, means anyone that has opened an email at least 3 times or subscribed to the list in that period of time. You can choose how you want to define that, but we like to make sure that they're highly, highly engaged, which is that they're actively opening our emails. Second thing you want to create is anyone who has purchased at least once over all time. And then you want to create a segment of people that are repeat purchasers. They are going to be very different intentions, and this will tell you a lot about your audience and any problems that you have in your marketing. And then last thing we like to create is win backs. So anyone who placed an order at least once over all time, but has not placed an order for the last 120 days or 90 days. It depends on your product and whether it's replenishable. But those are best practices. And so to go ahead and do that, you're going to add a filter, and let's just use anyone that has placed an order, right? So you're going to come here and you're going to search for your exact one. You can type it in and see if it's there. But let's just say place an order at least once in total. That is your specific segmentation. Now, if you want to make it that they have placed an order at least once and they also have opened an email, you can go ahead and do that. Or you can make them match both, but they don't have to match both exactly. So they can match one or the other, and that's where you'll add in an or. So super simple, and means that they have to apply all of these conditions to match and go into the segment. And then or is just they can match one or the other, and then they'll go in there. So let's just say this is a highly engaged, and we want to say have opened a message at least 3 times. And then you can choose in the last 100, let's just say 120 days. And then you can save and show the contacts. So super simple. Now that's as summarized as I can possibly get on Omnisend. Again, it is so user-friendly. Just watch me go through absolutely everything. And that's why we use it for some of our clients. Now, what I recommend you go ahead and do is on the topics of campaigns and flows and segmentation, I have different videos about all of those. I have some case studies that you can watch as well. Apply some of the logic there to your own marketing. And so I just recommend you watch a few different videos to get a really good feel. Now, if you are a brand, you don't necessarily want to deal with the headache of doing this yourself. You want to work with the platform and you also want to do email marketing and scale your brand, then go down below and book in a call and we'll help you get set up. We're an agency, so we work with some of the best brands in the world and we would love to work with you as well if you're looking to scale. Now, if you're not, then no worries, go consume some of the rest of my content.